Hi, guys. So this is going to be a relatively short lecture, and it's going to just cover several topics, namely wealth inequality, consumerism, payday lending, student loans, capitalism versus socialism, and business ethics. It'll go quickly because in some cases, I'm just going to raise a couple of points for you to consider uh, so that you have them in mind as you think about the topic. So let me ask the first question because we're essentially talking about money here. How much money does it take to make someone happy? How much money would it take to make you happy? Honestly, truthfully, don't say, oh, $1 billion. No, no, honestly, an annual income of X, I think I could live okay. I don't know what number you just picked there, but uh, national studies have shown that that people who actually have money, and so they surveyed people who are all along the income spectrum for their degree of happiness. So they started, let's see, with the person who had very low income to someone who had an incredible amount of income. So they're along the spectrum. And then they asked them to rate their level of happiness and how happy they were and what amount of money they were happy. As it turns out, the amount of money that you need to be happy is surprisingly low. The study found that it peaks at about $75,000 a year. Beyond that, the more money you had does not, or the more money you have doesn't necessarily make you happier. Um, Certainly below that, you can be less happy, but beyond $75,000, maybe you can do a few more things, but it doesn't really buy you happiness. So, in the truest sense of the word, money doesn't buy you happiness. Only about $75,000 can buy you happiness. So, why do we think that we need more money and we need more things? We're going to talk about that in just a moment because that gets into consumerism. But when we talk about wealth and who has wealth, if we were to take $100, $100 and distribute it to a population of 100 people, one person would have about 51% of that money. So we have 100 people in a room, and we're going to distribute the money the way it is distributed today in the world. And one person, 1%, is going to have $51. So the other 99 have to work on the 49. What's even more is that the second person in the room is going to get probably about 20, 30 bucks. So that means that the other 98 people really have to work with about 20 bucks, maybe 30. My point is that there is a huge wealth gap in the United States, all around the world, in fact, a huge wealth gap. There are 26 billionaires are worth more than half of the planet. And of that 1% that we're talking about, that's about 19 million Americans out of 350 million Americans. So the 1% in the United States is about 19 million Americans. That's actually a surprisingly high number. I've known a few of them through the years. But 26 billionaires around the world are worth more than half the planet. So that tells us that the bottom 99% of the US and of the world really lives on a very small amount of money. A very small amount of money. In fact, during this pandemic, the pandemic has been going on. It started in March, let's just say March of 2020. And as of November of 2020, so let's say that's a full 9 months, the wealthiest Americans have added $1 trillion to their wealth. Now that's someone like, for example, Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon. And we all know that everything comes from Amazon these days. But that's a really staggering number when you consider that there are people in this country who live far, far below the poverty line, which the US government defines as something like $24,000, $25,000 a year for a family of 4. I don't know anybody who could live on that. Now, curiously enough, I actually, I don't personally know Jeff Bezos, but I'm familiar with someone who does. And I've traveled lots of times to communities where they probably live on about $24,000, $25,000 a year. But let's not kid ourselves. Most of us are, I know we like to think we're middle class, but technically most of you are, you might be middle class, but most of you are probably working class. Meaning that you will have to work your entire life. Meaning that most of you will be one paycheck away from a very serious financial crisis. But you're not alone. That's where most people are these days. So we have to ask ourselves the question, if the majority of folks are just getting by, But yet the wealthiest Americans added $1 trillion to their wealth in 9 months. How much is enough? How much is actually enough? How much is too much? Is there such a thing as too much? And if there is, what is that amount? And if there is too much, what do we do about it? The wealth income gap in the United States is growing because of the technology divide, the increasing globalization of the world. I mean, there's just increased globalization. There's a rise of certain, shall we call them, financial superstars, like, you know, Bezos and Zuckerberg. But then there's also a falling need for labor. We need fewer workers to do a lot of the things that once we needed workers to do. And that means that a very few are seizing the advantage. They're seizing the advantage. So what is the government's role, if the government has any role, in making our financial situation more equal? 70, 80 years ago, it would not be unusual for the wealthiest Americans to pay something like 70% of their income in taxes. Nowadays, and they still grew their wealth. Nowadays, many of them are taxed at a lower tax rate than you are. So then how do we respond to poverty when we see it in our nation? What are we to do about the fact that if you are brown or black, you're more likely to be in poverty? What are we to do with children and poverty? And just on a personal level, how do you respond to the stranger, to the poor person, to the beggar who asks you for something? Because oftentimes there's as much of a disparity between you and the beggar as there is between you and the Fortune 500 CEO. Percentage-wise, there's probably that much difference. So why do we constantly think that we need more? What is this that drives us? It is consumerism. Consumerism drives us to feel like we need more and we want more. If we put it into real perspective, however, for most of the history of humanity, people have not had what we call disposable income. If you had possessions at all, they were necessities. They were your farm animals and your farm implements. They were the clothes. And if you had 2 suits of clothes, you were doing well. Most people only had 1. And it was whatever you were wearing that day. Maybe you had a few kitchen implements as well. A pot, a bowl, a spoon. That's really all you would have eaten. You wouldn't probably wouldn't have had a plate. You would have had everything in a bowl and eaten it with a spoon. And that would have been about all of your worldly possessions. But that began to change in the 18th century. That is the 1700s for those of you who can't do that math. In the 18th century, incomes began to grow because of industrialization, because of the growing middle class, because of just the world began to change, and people began to have what is known as disposable income. So then consumers were left with more choices. And that meant that the people who tried to appeal to consumers were left with more choices as well to offer, more choices to offer to those consumers. The sellers had more to offer. And so then that created then some dilemmas that we can think about, such as legal liability, whether or not the government should regulate things. Should the government really regulate prices? Well, our government does, in some cases, regulate prices. But what about consumer choice? Generally, the government does not regulate consumer choice, although it might help regulate market price. Consumer choice is limited usually by the fair market. I know, for example, there was a brand of yogurt. It was a generic brand, but that was my favorite. That was my go-to. And every week I would buy exactly the number of cups I needed for that week. And that would, be my yogurt for the week. Apparently, I was one of the only people buying it because the stores don't carry it any longer. Same thing happened. There was a brand of water that I'm a little bit of a water snob. I love Pellegrino, but there was a generic brand that was very good. It had a very good hint of lime to it that I really enjoyed. And apparently, again, I was the only one because they don't carry it any longer. And so the brands aren't limited by the government. The choices are limited by the consumer. If people aren't buying, then they're not making. That's just the way the market works. But then there are other things to consider as well. What about the quality of the products that we consume? What about the quality? When you think of well, let me just say my Volkswagen Jetta versus my wife's Audi. They are essentially both German cars by the same manufacturer. The Audi, the Volkswagen, essentially the same car. In fact, I remember when I bought my Jetta a few years back, the guy told me this unibody construction is the exact same thing that they do on Audi. And in fact, if you buy or finance one or the other, you might go through Volkswagen credit or Audi credit. I know when I financed my car, it was through Audi credit. And I think there was something I heard about Volkswagen credit for an Audi. Doesn't really matter. The point is they're exactly the same car, but the quality is vastly different. Now, I'm pretty happy with my Jetta. I put a lot of miles on it. So that's why I bought the car that I did, and it's paid off now. So I'm happy to continue to drive it for a few more years. But when I do drive my wife's Audi, oh my God, so much nicer. So the quality of the merchandise determines the price of the merchandise. And consumers then have to weigh, what am I getting for my value? What quality am I getting for the value of the money that I'm getting? But then there's also the idea of the warranty of the item. For how long will this be good? And what type of maintenance or care will I have to give it? I got to tell you, I beat the hell out of my Jetta. I don't ever do anything to it other than put a little fuel in it and change the oil and rotate the tires. It's good. But that just means that it's probably a good quality car that I'm able to do that for, especially for the price. Speaking of pricing, should people be allowed to manipulate prices? You know, this was really starting to happen at the beginning of the pandemic. There were cases where people had hand sanitizer and they increased the price. Well, very often the government, especially states, will step in and say, you can't raise the price that much on that item. You can't gouge the consumer, or you can't bargain with another company to fix the price. There are two ways of fixing prices, by the way. One is horizontal, that is, the companies agree. The other is the vertical, the retailers agree. So the retailers say, this is what we're going to charge for this item. On other cases, it's the companies, the large companies that provide it, that say, this is what we're going to charge. But there are some degree of prohibition against price fixing on some items. We also have to realize that there has to be truth in labeling and packaging. And this is where we depend on the government. That there's truth in the label and the packaging, that the item contained inside of the package is actually the item that the description gives us and is the quality that it promises. And we have to be wary of deceptive techniques, such as ambiguity and concealment, exaggeration, or even psychological manipulation. This really comes into play if you're watching television late at night and you see things advertised on television and not sold in stores. Well, there's usually a reason it's not sold in stores, because it's probably too good to be true. And if it seems too good to be true, then it probably is. And this is true of diet supplements and diet helps, that they're very often hyped for things that they can't do and can't provide. And so as consumers, then we need to be wary of ambiguity, concealment, exaggeration, or even psychological manipulation. But then, of course, there's the question that we should ask ourselves: what do we do about ads directed at children and the elderly? We know, we probably all remember as we approach the Christmas season, that the ads directed at children increases. Well, is that really fair that advertisers would direct their ads towards children? And you might say, well, children are fair game, and those who market have a right of free speech in their advertising. But what about to the elderly? When they're selling or marketing a product to the elderly that they might not be savvy enough to understand how it works. I worry about that with the reverse mortgage for some people. They might not fully understand exactly how that works. And there are other things that are marketed to the elderly that one has to wonder if they understand it. So that then begs us as consumers to be ethical consumers, to really be in the know about what it is that we're buying. My wife is the world's best at doing market research on an item before she purchases it. She reads the reviews and what other people have said, and she even reads things like consumer reports before she buys cars. And um, so it really behooves us to be informed consumers and not just mindless, I like it, I want it. That's called impulse buying. And that's why they put things near the cash register, because you're about to check out. And if you were at the back of the store, you would look at this item and you'd say, there's no way in hell I need this. And you would put it back because there's a long way between the back of the store and the checkout. But if you're standing in the checkout line, it's a lot easier to reach over and grab that little item and drop it on the scale, drop it on the scanner, and before you know it's in the bag and you're out the door. So being an informed consumer is very important. Part of being informed is knowing how and where you spend your money, and what's working with your money and what's not, and how much money you have to work with. There's a practice that is, well, it's very troubling to say the least, and it's called payday lending. Payday lending. Now, payday lenders can be quite helpful to some people. If you don't know what a payday loan is, it's basically a business wherein you go and you show, you give proof of your weekly salary, your weekly income, and a payday lender will loan you against your next paycheck, and you will pay that back with a fee, which is basically simple interest. This gets into a lot of difficulty, and I'm going to post a video for you to watch about this, because in truth, payday lenders often charge 300 to as much as 2,000% interest. 300% interest up to 2,000% interest on top of fees. And that's just an astronomical. But the problem is that the people who can least afford that are the people who most often avail themselves of these techniques and lose the most money. I saw a meme recently, and it showed a nice house with a 2-car garage, and it showed mortgage payment $950 a month. And beneath that, it showed a public housing building, and it said rental income $1,200 a month. And it said, you know, knowing or having good credit really pays off. And I think that that's the point. Unfortunately, people who can least afford credit are the ones who are most in need, and therefore pay the most for it. And it's really unfortunate that things like payday lenders take advantage of people in need. Another way that people are taken advantage of when they're in need is student loans. Let's talk about that for a moment. Some of you, many of you, might even have student loans right now, and you might think this is the best way for me to get ahead in life. My family said I need a college education, and so therefore I'm going to borrow money. The problem is a surprising number of people never finish their degree, and they never go out and get that job that for which they were hoping, for which they were going to school. And as a result, they're left working the same job they were working when they were in school, but now they are saddled with a debt that will prevent them from being able to purchase a new car, from being able to purchase a new home, because if they're making payments on it, many times those payments are more than what their car payment would be. Furthermore, if you're not aware of this, you can't claim bankruptcy and get out of a student loan. There's no way to bankrupt yourself out of a student loan. So you're saddled with that for the rest of your life. The amount of student debt has just risen to staggering levels in the US. And some have argued that one of the best ways to stimulate the economy once the pandemic is over is to provide for student loan relief. Maybe 10,000, maybe 50,000, maybe all student debt should be wiped out. What I would caution you about, however, is to not fall into the trap of going to a for-profit college. Many of these have gone out of business, but they are still out there. And let's be honest, all colleges have to make a profit if they are going to succeed. Even Raritan has to operate in the black if it's to succeed. But there are for-profit colleges who simply sell degrees. There are regular state schools who basically sell degrees, but at least you have an earned degree to put, letters to put after your name. But then this raises the question, should higher ed really cost us anything anyway? Should you get the first 2 years free, especially if you decide to go to a community college? Or if you go to a state school, should those first 2 years be free and you only have to pay for the 4-year degree if you want to go those additional 2 years? So what is the value of the degree that you're hoping to earn? What is the actual value of a higher ed degree, and what are the benefits of taking on student debt? I would encourage you to do the math. If you want to own a home, own a car, and especially if you want to have children, you need to think long and hard before accumulating too much student debt. Because if you rack up too much and you're paying $1,500 a month, and you're only earning, let's just be generous and say $4,500 a month, and you're left with $3,000 a month, and your mortgage might be $1,000 a month, where does that rest of that money go then? It's going to be difficult for you. So really do count the cost before you incur a lot of student loan debt. Couple more things to consider. We've heard a lot in the past year or so about socialism versus capitalism. Just a statement, just so that you're aware of this. The United States is not a democracy, it's a republic. It's a democratic republic. In similar fashion, the US is a capitalist society. Our financial markets are based on capitalism, but they do not have to be based on capitalism. They could be based in part on socialism. There is nothing to prevent that. Now, when I talk socialism, I'm not talking about Venezuela. I'm not talking about the Soviet Union. When I talk socialism here, I'm more so speaking in terms of what many of the Scandinavian countries enjoy, where that there is a hybrid between socialism and capitalism. So for example, what they have chosen to do in many of these Scandinavian countries is they've said, we will pay higher taxes because we want free health care for everyone. We will pay higher taxes because we want everyone to be able who makes the grade to earn a 4-year degree so that they can work and earn more income and therefore pay more in taxes. We want to pay more in taxes so that we have time off from work. And we want to pay more taxes, but not put it into things like the expansion of our military. We want to pay more taxes so we have good roads. But we don't want to pay more taxes so that it goes to X, Y, and Z. These are decisions that we as the voters can make if we choose to. Enough about that. That's not an advocacy for socialism, as just simply wanting you to realize that just because we're a democratic republic doesn't mean that we're automatically capitalistic. We could be something else. We could do it another way. Just a reality. So, okay, so a little bit about business ethics. These are the principles, values, and standards that guide behavior in business based on individual beliefs and social concepts. So our different religions, cultures, and such will define our ethics a little bit differently. When we're talking about business, that it is the same. But there are some things that are legal, but might not be ethical. And there are some things that are ethical, but it might not necessarily be an issue of legality. So as businesses have to operate legally and ethically, and some might even say humanely in order to be successful. So just 3 things to keep in mind as we talk about business, or as you think about business ethics, is number 1, the fiduciary responsibility, the trust. You must consider the consequences of your actions and interest on all the parties. So if you have a fiduciary responsibility, it means you've been entrusted, and holding that trust then means that you have to, before you make an action or do a thing, you have to consider the consequences of that action. That sounds a lot like consequentialism, doesn't it? Yeah. Secondly, your actions in business must address the stakeholders. So who are the stakeholders in a business? It would be the suppliers, the employees, and if you have shareholders, them. I heard a story recently on NPR of a business that went under. I think he ran a distillery out in New Mexico. And the guy talked about the struggle to stay afloat and how he had to close his business. And when he closed, he was down to 3 employees. But as he was contemplating closing, he was thinking about those people who supplied him with the things that he needed to make his product, and the people who depended on him to send that product out. And so in business, you have to think about all of the stakeholders. And then the final thing is more of a question. Must profit be the only concern, the only motive of a company? Must profit be the only concern or motive for a company? Now, I leave that one up to you, because if you're going to own a business, um, must profit be your priority? If you run a not-for-profit, you still have to make a profit. But the question is that your motive? Is that your primary concern? Okay. Thanks so much. Watch for a following video that'll have instructions for the week. Thanks. Goodbye.